Hello, I'm Rami Niranjan Desai. My guest today has many firsts to her name. Not least, she is the first woman guest that I've had in this series of interviews I'm doing on Australia-India relations. So thank you, Lisa Singh, for being on this show. And I am delighted that the director and CEO of Australia-India Institute is with me today. Lisa is also a former Australian politician, and she was Australia's first female federal parliamentarian of Indian origin. Welcome, Lisa.
Oh, thank you very much, Rami. It's a pleasure to join you for this interview.
Thank you, Lisa, for your time. But let's start this interview, and I want to begin by asking you about education, a subject that I know that you're very passionate about. So, starting with the Australian Research Corporation Hub, could you tell us a little bit about what kind of work is this hub doing, and what does it hope to do in the future?
Look, the Australia Research Corporation Hub India is an online platform for researchers between Australia and India to connect on their expertise, build relationships, share information, and explore opportunities for research collaboration and also two-way mobility between both of our countries. But most importantly, it's an initiative that is administered here at the Australia-India Institute. And it was provided through funding from our Australian government. And it really is a fantastic platform to strengthen and increase our bilateral research cooperation. It has its own website. It has a mentorship program which supports researchers and other scholars interested in establishing new research links between Australia and India. And ever since its launch last year, the website has received over 30,000 views and more than 60% of its users are in fact based in India. So it's had a higher uptake in India than in Australia to date. We actually had a more formal launch of the Arch India program with both Ministers Pradhan and Minister Jason Clare during Minister Pradhan's visit a few months back here in Australia. So that really elevated our Arch India platform. It is a fantastic way for us to really build our research collaboration. And I think it's got a lot more opportunities to really sort of strengthen the relationship between Australia and India.
Absolutely, clearly, with the amount of visitors coming on, it's clear the kind of interest that there is. But having said that, you mentioned that the Indian Education Minister, Dharmendra Pradhan, was on a recent visit to Australia, and everything was discussed from research to vocational training. In your opinion, what is the most exciting area of collaboration in education between India and Australia?
Well, I think there's lots actually. In terms of looking at the future of the Australia-India relationship, digital education is certainly at the forefront of that. And I know that our Australian government, through Austrade, has developed an India Digital Education Hub, which looks at the employability of Indian students and graduates, which is an important outcome of Indian students studying in Australia. We've also got an Australia-India skills portal that fosters greater collaboration between different skills sectors of both of our two countries. And I think, skills and digital education is really part of the future when we talk about what the Australia-India education relationship really looks like. So I think these are really important facets that will continue to grow as the Australia-India relationship becomes stronger. But these are things for Australia to still develop. And I think that's an exciting part that I want to see grow. Now, firstly, just getting back to Minister Pradhan's visit, one of the most exciting parts of that visit, I think, was the fact that, we had the official launch of Arch India, our Australia Research Cooperation Hub. But also we had the launch of the Australia-India Research Student Fellowships Program. This is a program, again, being administered here at the Australia-India Institute that enables emerging researchers or postgrad students, either in India or Australia, to do a research exchange in either country for up to 8 weeks. And the application process is now closed, but we're looking forward to granting those fellowships in the coming weeks so that they can take up their opportunity for that exchange in 2023. Another really exciting component of Minister Pradhan's visit was looking at forging deeper collaboration in the skills development sector, working together, for looking at a more future-ready workforce. I think we mustn't forget skills as part of the important equation when we talk about our educational relationship. And also looking at mutual recognition of education qualifications, so that those Indians that are coming to Australia, their education qualifications are recognised. And I understand there's going to be some sort of agreement signed before the end of the year in relation to that. But I think there really is no greater sector with more promise for Australia in India than education. It really is such an important sector for Australia, because when we look at India, we know that it has nearly half of its population under the age of 25. That creates a really important opportunity for Australia, because getting an education right is critical, I think, for Australia, but also the fact that Australia is a world-class education provider. We are very well placed to partner with India across secondary, university, and vocational education sectors. And, I think it really is the biggest trading opportunity for the Australia-India relationship as well. It deepens our research and innovation ties. It will boost our bilateral relations and support India, more importantly, to meet the growing demand in the education sector.
Absolutely, Lisa. I think we've all seen the focus of Indian students moving now towards from Europe to Australia. Just the sheer numbers tell us how interested they are to go to Australia to pursue higher education. But like you mentioned, that India has such a large youth population. So skilling is very important for us, as it is for Australia as well. What would be the areas of skilling, if you could shed some light on that India and Australia would be looking at? And also, when you mentioned Australia-India Research Students Fellowship Program, what are the areas of research that students could be applying for?
Well, I think that there needs to be, more of a deeper discussion around some of your questions there, around looking at skills standards, looking at certification frameworks to ensure, we are equipping the youth with the correct skills for the future, connecting them with employment and improving skilling outcomes, strengthening that linkage between industry and academia is important to sort of respond to skills needs. And I think that piece of work still needs to happen. And one of the ways in which that could happen is, as I said, by creating this Australia-India Skills Portal. That is something that has been proposed, to look at that in terms of, how we can strengthen our skills relationship. Another area that I think it has happened is looking at a sort of some sort of way in which we can strengthen linkages in the vet and skills engagement sector through this Australia-India Education Council agenda. Now, this is the two ministers that come together annually. They want to focus very much more on skills. That's what clearly came out of the meeting this year. I was sitting in on that meeting. So I think that's really important. But what is clear is that there is, despite India making, despite India sort of providing or bringing out more engineers than any other country in the world, I think, there is still this demand for more skilled individuals working in the tech sector. Now, that could be the tech sector in India or in Australia. We have a burgeoning tech sector because this is the innovation and jobs of the future. But we need trained individuals in STEM areas to be working into those areas. So I think when we talk skills, we need to look at it in a more broad context. We need to look at skills in the tech sector as being, an area where we need to create a really highly productive, future-ready workforce. And I think, perhaps more research and more work needs to be done on where the gaps are in that space.
Quite right, but let's turn to Australia India Institute now. It's widely recognized that you have given it a new breath of life after taking it over. So congratulations. Tell us where you intend to take it.
Well, look, when I took over this role over a year ago now, I created a new strategy. And part of that was creating new program areas for the Institute to focus on. And the reason for that is because I wanted the Institute to be relevant to the bilateral relationship, but also promoting and enhancing the Australia-India relationship. So the areas that I created as our key program areas, there are 4. One is in the security and geopolitics program. One is the bilateral economy. One is in cultural diplomacy. And one is in education. Of course, we've talked a lot about that already in terms of it's supporting both countries. So through those 4 program areas, we're really driving a lot more focus on how we can ensure the Australia-India relationship continues to grow on its high that it currently is on. One of the things, though, out of all of that is probably the flagship for the Institute is the Australia-India Leadership Dialogue. Now, this is a track 1.5 dialogue made up of government leaders, business leaders, academic leaders, the premier forum for informal diplomacy between our 2 countries, who come together. We held it in Delhi in September to deepen our understanding and enhance that framework that we have for regional security, promoting business and commercial opportunities, and advancing our people-to-people links. So, look, I was really pleased to co-host and co-chair the dialogue in September in New Delhi with our corporate partner, which is Atlassian, an Australian-founded tech company based in Bengaluru, to really see how we can really drive a deeper relationship through emerging technology in our modern world, which, as we know, when we talk about emerging technology, it really is ubiquitous. It cuts across so many different sectors. So, of course, our dialogue focused on education, on trade and investment, on cybersecurity and AI, on service delivery through medtech and fintech, and, of course, on that ongoing demand of tech talent. So I'm looking forward to that event continuing next year. Of course, we have a number of experts here at the Australia-India Institute that provide really good policy dialogue. We also want to do more next year in the security and defence space, particularly looking at perhaps a opportunity for defence experts in India to come to Australia under a special visitors scheme to learn more about the Australian security landscape. I mean, I think this is where we have this shared area of the Indian Ocean that we can do so much more work in a security space. We are 2 countries, Australia and India, that want a prosperous and peaceful and shared Indo-Pacific. And of course, the Indian Ocean region is a region we both share as literal states as part of that. And of course, we also wanted to support our small island states, our Pacific Island nations, and work closer together in that space. So there's a lot of work we want to do in the security space, be it climate security, be it more hard power. But of course, we also want to continue to really build our education links between our two countries as well. And then there's all the cultural diplomacy that we do. And of course, we've done that hugely this year, celebrating 75 years of India's independence. I had the honour to speak last weekend for India's Constitution Day about the strengths of India's constitution, a living document, as I think Ambedkar called it. And I think also, you know, through our burgeoning Indian diaspora, the fastest growing diaspora community in Australia is the Indian diaspora. We've been able to engage with them, holding gala events for 75 years of independence, as well as publishing essays, writings from various scholars about the importance of India and Australia and what the next 75 years of Australia and India might look like if we were to so gaze into that sphere. So a lot of work for us here, but mainly, you know, our work is research, policy, stakeholder engagement. We're hosting a roundtable with another India think tank this week that we're pleased to invite here, looking at the role of women leaders in foreign policy, and particularly Australia and India in that space. I think as a female leader of a think tank of Indian origin, you know, it's nice to engage with other Indian female leaders in similar roles in India. I had the privilege of doing that in April when I was in India, and also obviously in September. I'm also planning my next trip to India in February, and looking forward to a number of Australians coming on that trip as well. Every trip I seem to go to India, there seems to be a number of Australians who come along as well. So it's certainly an exciting time. And of course, we've got a lot more two-way mobility now, Anajana, if I can say, in terms of our direct flights.
That's a huge amount of work that you know, the Institute is taking under your leadership, Lisa. And of course, like you said, you know, India and Australia, the relationship is at a height right now. And it's very exciting to know that you're focusing on security and defense. You intend to start a program next year because, you know, I think a free and open Indo-Pacific is so very important to both the countries, and both the countries being such large democracies have such a role, important role to play in this, and I think a responsibility. So I think, you know, this would be very exciting for us to see in times to come. But, you know, like you said in a recent article of yours as well, it was a great piece, by the way, on how Australian businesses should turn their gaze towards India, moving away from political issues with China. And of course, the ECTA, you know, is a historic deal. How do you see, apart from education, this sort of economic ties between the two countries developing?
Well, I've said many times that I think the Australia-India economic relationship is still quite underdone. And I think I was making that point the other day because it really was a watershed moment the other day when the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement passed the Australian Parliament. You know, this was more than 10 years in the making. And so it is significant. And I think we need to recognise that it allows both of our nations to trade goods and services almost tariff-free. And that means that for Australia, we can have a lot more diversity in terms of what it is that we trade in goods and services, not just looking at coal and gold and petroleum, but looking at a range of services, of goods that Australia produces that you know, perhaps we lost opportunities to export to China once those sanctions were placed, which of course cost Australia around $20 billion worth of Australian goods. That was, you know, the outcome of that sort of sanction regime. and which did affect our farmers. So I think that, when we look at now this opportunity, it's not just about China. It's the fact that we are two like-minded countries that should be trading a lot more together. This is something that should have, perhaps happened a long time ago. But, this will have an opportunity for Australian wine, for a number of agricultural products, all sorts of produce like avocados and almonds and oranges and blueberries and strawberries, all sorts, as well as looking at India's sort of more labor-intensive sectors such as the textiles industry, leather and footwears, jewelry and furniture. Again, a lot of benefit there for India as much as it is for Australia. So I think that, we recognise that India, has really taken a leap forward with Australia on this. India very much, I think prefers these sorts of trade agreements rather than the mega preferential trade agreements. But I think it really does send a clear message that Australia and India will become much closer economic partners in the 21st century, as much as we have become a lot closer geopolitical partners. I think there's definitely a convergence there now on both the economic and the geopolitical part of our relationship. And it comes at a momentous time when India is taking over the presidency of the G20. So, I think there's a lot more that both of our countries can do together in the trade space. I don't think that Indos-ECTA is job done. I think it's just the beginning. We still need to negotiate a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement, which would be a full free trade agreement for both of our countries. Very important that we still focus on that. One of the areas, of course, that there's a good marriage between Australia and India is when India looks at wanting to, manufacture semiconductors, looking at those sort of opportunities in the renewable sector, EV batteries, and all of the sort of components, those critical minerals that are needed to go into those. Australia has something like 21 out of the 49 critical minerals identified in India's critical minerals strategy. So, in terms of science, technology, health, critical minerals, Australia can really work closer with India, diversify its trade and supply chains. And that's only going to be good for both of our countries as we continue to build a much stronger relationship based on trust, based on common interests and shared values. And as two, thriving democracies, I think we're very good partners to work together in that space. Of course, we both have the history of coming out of colonialism, of the Commonwealth. I think there's so much more that we could be doing together in the trade space. We have in Australia done a lot of that groundwork in terms of the foundation to make this trade deal thrive. We've got an India economic strategy. And that strategy outlines, it was written by former Australian High Commissioner Peter Varghese to India. But it has an ambitious plan for Australia and India to 2035 to deepen economic links. And of course, you wouldn't be surprised that in me saying that it's the education sector that really is one of the major pillars for us to really develop our economic relationship. And I still do see that as being such an important area for growth for both of our countries, which of course leads to such a positive outcome in terms of strengthening our people-to-people links through that process as well.
Absolutely, Lisa. I think on that note, the fact that, India and Australia are going from strength to strength, developing their partnership, yet there's a lot more to do. Like you said, there is a comprehensive economic strategy that, should be developed. But having said that, let me come to my final question. As someone of Indian origin, what are your thoughts about the rising significance of the Indian community in Australia today?
Well, I mean, it's phenomenal. And I think you can see the importance of the Indian diaspora across business, politics, judiciary, government, civil society, academia. I mean, the networks of the Indian diaspora play such a crucial role in strengthening our relationship. they have an understanding of India, and not only India in its cultural sense, but also in terms of economic markets, helping Australian businesses and their connections help Australia's image as a better destination in India as well. There was some government work done on Australia's Indian diaspora. It was a diaspora mapping report, and it was really good in terms of it encapsulating the rise of the diaspora, especially when bilateral relations have hit such a historic high. It really looked at how the diaspora is a key contributor, not just to trade and investment, but to Australia's international competitiveness. And this is in the areas of STEM, of course, the STEM sectors. But it also highlighted this key network that plays out through Australian professionals and company directors, entrepreneurs, who all have Indian ancestry. And a lot of the times we sort of look to the US-India relationship and how this incredible Indian diaspora in the United States have led to so many leaders of global companies, of tech companies, as we know. And we look at how can we learn from the US in that sense. But I think we need to recognize that Australia's Indian diaspora is a lot newer. That huge spike in migration has only really taken off over the last 10 to 20 years. So I think there needs to be some more research done to look at diaspora engagement, to better target, how our diaspora are growing into certain sectors, what the barriers are to leadership. I mean, it was a shock to me when I was elected to the Australian Senate in 2010 that I was the only person of Indian origin woman to be elected. I think when you recognise the size of the Indian diaspora, that does need to certainly does need to change. We do, as a multicultural country, need to ensure our democratic structures reflect the makeup of our society as a whole. But I think overall, our Indian diaspora is really an untapped national asset that we need to engage a lot more with.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really such an insightful discussion on the potential and possibilities of the Australia-India partnership. I will be bringing you many such interviews with key people to help you understand one of the fastest growing relationships between two of the largest democracies in the world, that is the friendship between Australia and India. I'm Rami Niranjan Desai. Thank you for watching.